Was that my? Yep. So while I get everything set up to do a live reaction, I am gonna wait for people to join. Hi, Logan. I'm just getting everything set up to start sharing the screen. How is everyone doing? My hair is messy bun, but it good. Making sure I stay modest because I like being modest. Even though this technically isn't immodest, I like taking it a step further because it's better to be more modest than less modest. So I did have a bit of a relapse. I'm just going to talk about my health journey real quick. My relapse was I didn't get my Dr. Pete, and all the other flavors are not that great. Like they're decent, but I have standards. And I relapsed quite a bit in drinking pops. I'm like struggling with that. Same thing with food. So, this was flapping, and I thought it was like on my thingy here. But I am getting better. We're going to share the entire screen with the audio. And I'm going to put this link in the chat. Then pin message. So then people know that this is what I'm watching.
Custom home is now easier than ever. And with America's Home Place, we can show you how. During our
Okay, let me tell you my experience then. I have seen that many times. I've seen men laugh at each other for like, oh, my girlfriend hit me.
Thing.
You should have been a man. You should have thugged it out.
But do you understand that maybe the guys you hang out with are the guys that they're so-called toxic? Because the masculine men that I'm talking about would never do that.
My name's John. It's been 5 years since I directed an episode on this exact same topic, and it has only grown more relevant. So let's jump into our discussion between feminists and men's rights activists. Men already have all their rights. If you agree, step forward.
Okay, I'm going to answer what I think it is. I feel as if the right to equality has been stripped away from men, specifically in matters of law, because men and women do not get equal punishment for the same crime. If anything, women have it easier and have more rights than men. I cannot tell you how many times the courts rule that there's a family and they're getting a divorce and all that, and they say, oh, the children will be with the mother, even though the mother is the one who's cheating, who's yelling at everyone, who is mentally unstable. Most of the time, the children get sent with the psychotic mother instead of the father, and the father still has to pay child support on top of that. Which, okay, hear me out. If we're doing my body, my choice with that whole thing, I'm going to ramble on this. If we're doing my body, my choice, then that should also apply with the men. If they don't want to pay child support, they shouldn't have to, because it's their money, their choice. So be prepared for a lot of ramblings today.
Forward.
I'm gonna eat a slice of pizza.
I hate the name men's rights activists because it does imply as if our rights are being taken away. The problem that men face is more existential. The patriarchy conditions men or assigned male at birth people to pretty much just keep your feelings shut down. By age 10, your feelings don't matter. And then 12 through 13 and onwards, you're just don't really feel like you matter much as a person. And I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that. Our rights aren't really under attack. Meanwhile, half of Congress hasn't codified Roe v. Wade. They're trying to control women's bodies, and it's just ridiculous. Like, our rights aren't under attack, but a lot of women's rights are, and I think it's important that we fight for that.
Right. I also think that there's a difference between like rights and inequality.
Let me tell you something that women have always had the ability to do. Do not have completed intimacy. Yeah, that's something that women have always had the right to do in our country. Well, not always. I'll say, in this time where they're complaining about not being able to have abortions, they've had always had the right to not be finished in, or to get contraceptives. Which people like to say, oh well, if you're not going to support abortion for those who use contraceptives, your point doesn't really matter. Well, you want to know what does matter? Most abortionists do not use any contraceptives, and based on reports, we don't even know what contraceptives they use. We don't even know how consistent they've been with using it, like if they're using birth control or if they're using Plan B, which is super expensive. Like, just all of that stuff is super expensive. Or if they get the thing that goes like the women one or the men one. There's a whole bunch of options for people to utilize their rights to use, but then they don't. So it's not attacking women's rights. You have plenty more rights. And I'm going to ramble a lot with this. Instead of complaining about whether or not you should take a life and being like, oh, we should have the right to do that, you should be more focused on the fact that there are women out there who are prohibited from speaking or singing in public places because their voices are too sensual. So imagine not being able to get an education, not being able to speak in public. Those are rights. Those are rights that should be given, not whether or not you can kill a baby in the fetal stages of development, just because you don't want to take accountability.
Yeah, of course.
So I don't think that my rights being taken away. I think that's just an effect of patriarchy.
I agree.
We're not like losing our bodily autonomy. We're not, fearing for our lives walking down a dark hallway, So I don't think they're comparable.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you look at most of the world's leaders are men, most judges are men. Look at even our Supreme Court, there's 9 judges, and how many are women?
We built a 7-figure business as a 2-person agency, and I wish we had HoneyBook when we started 10 years ago.
Businesses need to be organized.
Feel free to
the fact that women had to fight and ask to, in 1974, get access to have their own bank account, that's absurd. That's absurd that, just because there's a little clause in the Constitution that says all men being equal, they're going to play dumb and act like that means just men. It doesn't mean human. And for women to have to fight for anything to be equal to a man is just
ridiculous.
It proves that men have their right.
That was a long time ago.
If that's most of our Senate, our House, our Congress, everybody, they're the ones that vote over the laws and things that get passed. They have the rights, and they're the ones that dish them out to everybody else. And you're lucky if you can get them.
And we also need to remember men's right activism. While they do have some genuine plights, it started out as a combatant to feminism. So I feel like they laid the groundwork off a very bad foundation.
I 100% agree. I think it's been hijacked by a lot of bad faith actors who blame women for problems that you should blame the patriarchy.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's very frustrating because I'm on this side because I think that there is genuine problems that I think need to be addressed.
Exactly.
I'm sure we can all agree on that.
What are some of those problems?
High suicide rates. Men are 4 times as likely to, I don't know what the TikTok version of the phrase is, but 4 times more likely. I think that's something that should be talked about more. I think that there's also a lot of men are very hesitant to get rid of the notions of patriarchy, whereas I've noticed a lot of women or assigned female at birth people are very willing to just throw away any notions of femininity. I think a lot of men have a lot of emotional baggage from the patriarchy that they redirect at women, and it's not fair to them,
right.
And it's also hurting us.
Right.
And the problem is for some men, all they have is their notion of masculinity to the point that they cannot let it go, and they can't see anything else other than that. When the actuality is, again, gender is.
Something that I've learned to do in speech and debate is to be precise and not do word salad. Which I know when I'm rambling, I can do word salad. Well, literally, it's like females assigned at birth. Now, I mean no disrespect to the LGBTQ plus community. I know that we have differences in our thinking. But I'm going to go to what the science says. And the science says that the gender is actually dependent on the brain connections, which your brain connections is dependent. Like, I'll give an example. Women have more side to side brain connections, like they're stronger side to side, but men have more stronger back to back. So that's like biology. And science says that if gender is based on the way that your brain connections develop, you want to know what develops your brain? What is crucial in making those stronger connections? Your sex. So scientifically, even using their arguments, their points of gender is just the way your brain is, it's still your sex. So make it easy, make it make sense. But like I said, if you disagree, that's okay. I'm just letting you know my position. Because I think everybody should be respected. And if you are open to having a discussion on this, then I say let's have a discussion, but we won't be rude to each other. I've been rambling.
Isn't real. We're just plants with complicated emotions. When I look at people, I just see human-shaped flowers.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would say that a lot of these men's rights activists, they're struggling. Like you said, they have high suicide or high self-deletion, whatever we're supposed to say, rates. And the way they're coping with it, and the way that they're coping with it is by saying, okay, we're having this issue, so we need to put women back.
Exactly.
And be this, we need to take away their rights. We need this society to be the way it was, where like all the rights that were afforded to people, it was men. And men were the first people.
I'm going to share the truth. I have met maybe one person who thinks like that, where they need to push back women's rights. In fact, I know that there are a lot of men who are suicidal and depressed and do self-harm and mentally unstable that are on both sides. Like, there's people like that on the conservative side, and I have met and interacted with people who are like that on the liberal side. Those who are for abortion and all that, and they're still severely depressed. That's not dependent on like pushing women's rights back. That's literally just how society has been, and it's a real issue that you can't say, oh, well, they're trying to push women's rights back. No, we need to address the cause of it. And that comes with the matters of law, how men are treated unfairly when it comes to the law, when it comes to like being able to express their feelings. And I don't mean in the sense of, I know a lot of men will look at that and be like, expressing feelings, that's for the weak. No, you can express your feelings in a healthy way. Say, look, I feel particularly frustrated about this or particularly angry about this because it's awful. Or you can do word salad like I do half the time.
To get rights, and then other people have to, especially white men, and then everyone else has to catch up to them, and because they're struggling, they go, oh, let's turn the clock back.
And we're bringing in race into it now. That's another thing. They discriminate. They just, as you just saw, they discriminated. They were like, especially white men.
Number one, that's impossible. Yeah. You're not going to turn the clock back. And number two, I don't think that's actually going to help the issue.
It's not going to help the issue. It'll hinder it.
On the suicide thing, I do think it's important to have a little bit of nuance that women actually attempt suicide far more often. The reason why men are more successful as it is because they're more likely to own a firearm and use it.
Yes.
But in terms of like,
I can't speak for certain on who are more likely to have a firearm, but there are multiple ways to commit suicide. I'm not going to list the reasons to give anybody ideas, but there are so many ways one can commit suicide using household items. And this is speaking as someone who struggled with thinking like that. So don't go down the firearm path. There's multiple ways.
Men fighting for rights. I think that like movements that attempt to fight for rights for particular groups, that sort of description should be exclusive to genuine social justice movements. You know, there may be disparities in ways in which the patriarchy does disadvantage men, but I think that you can't co-opt the language of it being a social justice or rights-based movement.
No, that's the problem is that like I have this thing I say, I feel like saying that like men have feelings is kind of like saying all lives matter, because men only ever bring up their problems directly after women bring up theirs. So it just sounds dismissive. And that's the problem, is that for a lot of men, I think we feel so uncared for by society. We feel so like just like we don't really matter unless we prove our worth, that anytime any social movement gets any sort of traction, we just immediately just bum rush that.
And it really makes me wonder that there are rational men's rights activists seen as yourself, but are these people advocating, the bad actors, for women's rights to be peeled back for them to feel comfortable?
I think so, because I think the problem is that a lot of men, again, people who are so rooted in their gender bother me, because it only hurts you. it only hurts other people around you. It's kind of like the idea of like, because the problem is that men are allowed to express anger, but they're not allowed to express sadness.
Right.
Women are allowed to express sadness, but you cannot express anger.
Or else they get called like a bitch.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never heard one men's rights activist talk about like men, the loneliness epidemic of men not having friends.
without
It's
men.
always like women's
Exactly.
problem.
No, I agree.
They don't want to date you. They don't
Yeah,
want to
no,
like.
stupid.
They never offer any
talk about
solutions.
that, yeah.
No solutions.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is a great opportunity to bring in our disagreeers, but I ask that we listen to what they have to say before we disagree with them.
So the perspective that I come from was about 3 years ago, I wanted to know why men didn't want to get married anymore. I kept hearing men say, I don't want to get married. And it kind of took me down the rabbit hole of family court. I started interviewing men that had been what's called divorce raped. And I kept finding guy after guy after guy that lived a couple miles from his kids and could not see them.
When voting rights are under attack, it's use
I
it
have
or
mixed
lose
feelings
it.
about
So
Pearl.
vote.
Mainly because I feel like her men's rights stuff is more attacking other women than men. So
beauty is personal.
I have mixed
and
feelings
you
about
deserve
her.
products that do it all.
But I do think that was a
That's
good
why
point.
each true.
It goes back to men should have access to their children. It's 50% their DNA. They should get 50% custody off the bat. And right now, 90% of the time, women get custody. The question was, do men have all of their rights? How can I say that they have all of their rights when I'm finding guy after guy after guy that is devastated he can't talk to his children? I had one guy who the woman got custody and she ended up taking the kid to a different country. And now his kid doesn't speak his same language. He spent $300,000 trying to get that kid back.
I want to look at women's stories as to why they don't want to get married. And I could go interview 1,000 women. You're looking for these kinds of men.
What she is discussing are individual and yes, tragic cases, and we can acknowledge that. But what we're discussing is a systemic issue. On aggregate, men and women after divorce, women see a 27% decline in the reduction of their income. They're more likely to be in poverty.
That's because the income stuff. This is just a given known fact. Women don't seek the high-paying jobs. They're gonna get me, like saying things as a matter of fact. Women do not seek high-paying jobs. The ones that do, they're the ones with higher income. What will sometimes happen is the women will choose to fall behind in pursuing their careers instead of maintaining a healthy balance, like how I went to nail tech school and I'm getting certified and I can keep going there. So if something were to happen and I need to be the provider for me and my future family, not necessarily on divorce, but just like in general, I can step up and I can pay and I can make money. It is a choice to choose to withdraw from any chance of like pursuing a career life. And that's why you'll get a lot of like older women working in grocery stores. Because they fell behind in their education. They didn't keep pursuing stuff. They didn't find other alternatives. Like one thing I'm looking into or thinking about is, and I mentioned this before, creating a sign language class. I have to look at the specific cost, but if I could just get all the things I need for it, then bam, work a couple days a week, earn some money that way. That's like a choice you can make.
Poverty, and they're less likely to get remarried.
If you go around the world, there are countries that have male-only conscription, countries that have higher pension ages for men. Countries like the U.S. and Canada have certain welfare programs that men are excluded from, domestic violence laws, homeless laws. There are many cases where men do not have access to the same public welfare programs, tax-paid programs. And if you look at something like the draft in the U.S., people say, well, that's outdated. It doesn't happen anymore. But many countries in the world, included some that are considered like very first world progressive feminist countries, Austria, Finland, Switzerland, they have male-only conscription. And many countries have higher pension ages for men. So there are many examples of countries that have laws that directly discriminate against men. So do we have all the rights? I mean, no, we don't. In the US, I had to volunteer, well, not really volunteer, I wasn't given a choice, but I had to register for the draft. So that's a small example, but it's, one that still goes on today.
Going back to the family court thing, because we want to talk about traditional relationships and that's how it should be. The mom should stay home with the kids and the dad is a provider and all that. But then when it comes to the family court, we want to be like, oh, dads need 50% custody, but you don't even know your kid. You've been off providing all this time. And the only reason now you want 50% custody.
Be for real. I know of someone who would work 50, 60 hours a week. And I remember attending one of this person's family's or school's concert for their daughter. And he decided to go. He decided to be present. And I know his daughter absolutely adores him. and yet he is the provider. So that argument is not a very good argument. It's just a matter of balancing, and it is a lot of sacrifice. So I paused this thing like 15 times already. It's not even 10 minutes in, so I might have to make this a part 2. So it's really interesting.
Is because that's the only thing that still connects you to the woman, or whatever up reason you have. But it has nothing to do with the children at heart. It has to do with, I'm their father, I deserve 50% custody. But where were you the first 10, 15?
To her, what income were you bringing, or were you completely dependent on him to bring in the income, so he decided to take care of you guys financially? I'm not saying this like that's the only thing a man should do, because a man should keep pursuing a relationship with his children, but I've seen so many people who are set on like being a family man. You just don't hear about it because we got people who scream louder. I'm just gonna let this play.
18 years that we were raising the kids.
I'm not denying that they need their mothers or their fathers more. Men and women complement each other. That is what I'm saying. Some men are more masculine, some women are more feminine. My girlfriend's more feminine, I'm more masculine. We go very well together because our values align.
What is feminine?
No, but hold on. What is feminine to me? She wants to take care of children. She wants to
So that's feminine.
To me, it is. To me, it is. That is what I want in a woman. You can only speak from, I can name you the stat, but I'm talking about me. I'm talking as a person.
Name the stats.
So what about the stats where all the fathers who leave and don't pay child support? Isn't that far more common than these men who are on
Or the men who do
they're
get the
fighting for
rights.
custody?
Never mind. I'm gonna get mad at that real quick.
Which they only do 50% less than women do. When men want primary custody, they only file the appropriate paperwork 40% of the time. Women do it over 80% of the time, and then they complain that they're not courts don't give you something that you're not asking for. Period.
So what are you saying?
Men choose not to support their families. They waive responsibility.
Far more
Many
often.
times
That's very
they look
sexist
at.
to say that. It would say that fathers don't care about their kids.
No, then why aren't they actively fighting for the kids?
They are. It wouldn't be an issue if it didn't happen. It's an issue for a reason. There are lawyers that specialize in this. They wouldn't have a business if it didn't happen.
I know at least for you and possibly for Pearl, you guys want to reaffirm traditional masculine roles, which does not assume that men are the nurturing ones. And if that's going to be the case, then you're going to continue to run into the problem where men aren't going to get custody because women are going to be seen as the nurturing gender.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So if you don't want that.
Oh. We're not talking about gender, we're talking about biology. Yeah, we're going to be talking about biology now. To kind of summarize, women are nurturing because that's how their brains are. Men are a little bit different. That's why you see a lot of women who are more calm, like this, as an example. Like they'll speak like this, but then you'll get the men who, like, they're not trying to come off aggressive, but then they kind of talk like this. Because that's kind of like rooted in biology. So.
That to be the case, then it makes sense to stand with feminists and want to dismantle those sorts of norms and expectations around what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman.
I would say it should be 50-50 custody off the bat.
Women experience more sexism than men. If you agree, please step forward.
I would say sexism as in discriminating based on sex. I would say no. No, as in like both of them experience the same amount. Whether for or against, they're experiencing sexism.
What if I told you there's 17 different ways that you can use to acquire 20 new high-ticket clients in the next 6 months?
Skip. Walking at the fastest. Like
No, I don't know about like more, but I'm coming at this from like the point of view of like which is more dangerous.
Exactly.
Like misandry, men's feelings get hurt, but when it comes to misogyny, like sexism, women get hurt, killed. So when I think of more, I'm not thinking like, oh, they face more sexism.
Yeah.
Like, is the sexism like hurting you?
No, the same way. I was looking at it when I heard sexism. I just heard safety.
Yeah,
that was the way I was approaching it. The topic was basically men experience sexism. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I think the topic was just more sexism, like you said. Just simple things, just as like a man maybe just 10 feet behind you at night. You know, there are certain thoughts that just run into your head. Just simple ideas such as being treated differently in the entertainment industry versus how as a man. When I hear sexism, again, like you said, I view it more as just danger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like for men, me facing sexism, like you said, my feelings might get hurt, but I'm not gonna fear for my life. You know what I mean? As opposed to women, I think they genuinely do fear for their lives more, and I think we should work towards making a safe society for everybody.
Right.
And I think that that's ultimately, what's important.
Aside from safety, any other examples?
Yeah, I mean, I think when most people in power are men, and then they can abuse that power by, like, they're the common joke of, oh, she slept her way to the top. Like, that wouldn't be such a common joke if it weren't for women being sexualized and experiencing sexism so common that it's just a regular joke that we all just accept and just go with, ah, ha, ha, she slept her way to the top. Like, it's funny. Like, it's clear that since men have so much power, and not only that, but men are bigger than us. So if they want something from
I have never heard of that, except for people who have done it. Like, I've only heard she slept her way to the top from people who actually are like proved that they slept their way to the top. So I've never heard of that though.
from us at any point, they could just take it. They can, and a lot of times they do, and you just have to sit there and take it.
Men are each other's worst enemy. I feel like a lot of the sexism that men face that really impacts them is from other men. Men make fun of each other for like getting assaulted. Men make fun of each other for like not getting the girl. Men, like, these are things that if men really wanted, if these men's right activists really wanted to change this notion, they would be treating their fellow man better.
No, I mean,
but they're ridiculing them for not being masculine enough.
100%. Sorry. I was going to say, just I agree with everything you're saying. Like you said earlier, men shoot themselves in the foot, and I believe someone said earlier that men, when they talk about the loneliness epidemic, it's only about ever getting the girl. It's never about friends.
It's about camaraderie with people.
Exactly. No, yeah. What is it like? One of the things that I think that you really touched on it, men shoot themselves in the foot often. There's just this idea that it's the same way you see poor people attacking other poor people because they're not getting paid enough. Men will attack other men because it threatens their masculinity or because they're insecure in it. When again, I'm just like a broken record player here. It's not a real concept. Masculinity is not a real concept. Femininity is not a real concept. These are just things that just hold us back. And like you said, it halts us from really, truly like feeling heard, getting our feelings out there and like experiencing more empathy. We need to, again, destroy the system, destroy the patriarchy, and come up with a system that has empathy for everybody, because it just doesn't.
I think what's important to recognize is that misandry is not a systemic issue. It's not ingrained in us. To the extent that there is like rhetorical misandry of like women saying, I hate all.
Do I need to replay the past 15 minutes and to see how some of these people are talking about men? It's not a real issue. That this entire 15 minutes on the feminist side has been them berating men, like the men who don't do anything, the men who don't provide, blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to be a little dramatic here, but yeah, it is, and we can see it in this. So.
All men, it's just like individualized, like, yeah, sure, unhelpful things, but it's not an otherization in the same way that misogyny is.
Yeah.
No, I think that the world has been largely constructed through the male and man lens and in a way that has otherized women.
Oh boy, it says my stream was interrupted. Okay.